Welcome to the Edinburgh Television Festival and the Steve Hewlett debate, A Matter of Life and Death, which is speaking up for health and safety in the modern TV and film industry. We've all been asked to think of health and safety in these COVID times, but it's obviously important not to lose sight of other issues that are affecting our working lives. I'm Leif Arbuthnot and I'm chairing today. I'm a freelance journalist, and I first became interested in this subject after the very tragic death of the camera operator Mark Milsome, after I interviewed his wife Andra. Our panelists today have wide-ranging experience of film and the TV industry. I'll quickly run through them and then we'll get to the debate. So Kirk Jones is a director and writer. His films include Nanny McPhee and What to Expect When You're Expecting. He's chairman of the Mark Milsome Foundation, which he helped set up in memory of his friend, Mark Milsome, who was killed on set in Ghana in 2017. Sue Vertue is a drama producer with Hartswood Films, producing award-winning dramas including Sherlock, The Vicar of Dibley, and recently Dracula. Rory Kinnear is an award-winning actor, director, and playwright. He's known for roles in James Bond, Channel 4's Brexit, Uncivil War, and Black Mirror. He's also won lots of awards for his stage acting, including Hamlet at the National, for which he won the Evening Standard's Best Actor Award. And finally, Jake Edmonds is CEO of Media Safety Limited. He's been at the forefront of health and safety since the mid-90s and has overseen major blockbusters, including all 8 Harry Potter films and Batman, to name but a few. So if we could start with Kirk, could you possibly talk about what happened to your friend Mark Milsome and the foundation set up, and what the foundation set up in his name seeks to achieve?
I can. I first met Mark, I guess, in the mid-80s. We were at film school together and we stayed in touch over the years as our careers progressed. And unfortunately, in November 2017, I received a call to say that Mark had been killed whilst operating his camera and filming a stunt on a TV show which was being shot in Ghana. And soon after, his wife, Andra, asked if myself and others would consider setting up a foundation in his name. So not too long after that, we gathered about 16 people together, ranging from Mark's agent to cinematographers, camera operators, camera assistants, myself and a number of other people, friends and family, and tried to kind of work out what a foundation was. And, you know, because it's very easy to say, well, we'll set up a foundation, but then you have to sit down and work out really what that means and how it's going to be of use to the industry. And we wanted it to be supportive to the industry. We didn't want to just enforce any views that we had on the industry. We didn't want it to be a kind of a foundation which doesn't really do much other than have an annual dinner and dance and things. So we sat down and for some time, obviously, we started to say, you know, what would Mark do? But realizing that we could never anticipate or have the answer to that question, we started to say, what did Mark do? What did he actually do, you know, during his time and his career? He had incredible humor. He was incredibly well loved and respected. He was very talented. But one of the things that he was best known for was supporting young people and young talent. And we took that initially as a direction that we started to head in. We are only a year and 3/4 in, really, to the foundation being founded. We've looked after 5 trainees in the industry, and we chose them because they came from the regions, because they might not have easily got into the film industry on their own, because they weren't fortunate enough to have contacts with their parents or friends and family. But increasingly, and of course because of the nature in which Mark died, we have started to look at health and safety. And in January of this year, we drafted a survey which was launched a couple of months ago. We were very grateful to BECTU, to BAFTA, to the BSC, to GBCT. A number of organizations helped to circulate it. And we have with us now, although the survey is not finished, it's still an ongoing project. We've received about 1,500 surveys so far. And in addition to that, we've found about 3,500 comments which people have submitted to us with their concerns for health and safety, with their hopes for the future, and with personal experiences.
Could you share some early data from what the survey has found so far? What does it suggest is actually concerning crew? Because I know it was mostly crew who answered the survey.
Yeah, it was about 93% crew. The remainder was made up by production and actors, editorial, but essentially 93% crew. I think about 54% were Vertue members. So we're really talking about people who work on set and are involved in physical filmmaking. 84, sorry, I'm just glancing because there's so many facts and figures. 84% of people felt, 63% of people felt that health and safety could be improved, and they would encourage any organisation to try and do that. We had something like 4% say that they didn't feel there was any need for any improvement, so that was quite a clear message there. 84% had serious issues with the hours that were worked, and had concerns about that, including prep, normal shoot day, wrap, travel. It can be quite a complex equation. It's not just like a regular job, working 9 to 5. 80% of people felt that cuts to budgets in recent years were having significant implications and effects on health and safety. Only 13% of people were satisfied with the current health and safety standards. 84% of people said that they had been refused accommodation when they felt they desperately needed it, and when they were having to drive when they were very tired, either to or from set. Over 50% felt that they had driven when they were when they were overtired and they were in a dangerous state. And 9% said that they had actually been involved in a physical road accident as a result of driving whilst tired. So there are, just at a quick glance, these aren't small figures, and they're also reflected in, Vertue did they have a petition which I think now has 11 or 12,000 people names on it, which is Eyes Half Shut, which deals with similar situations. I think the TV and film charity did an investigation. They had surveys, I think, amounting to about 12,000 responses. And from what I can see, there's a similar pattern evolving. So these aren't small percentages. These are a significant percentage of people who are very concerned about health and safety in the modern industry.
Yeah. So in your experience as a director, is it clear that there are issues with health and safety on set? This will surprise you, and I'm sat here today talking about the possibilities to whether there are or whether there aren't. I would genuinely say that before Mark died on set, that I had seen, in probably my 25 years in the industry up until that point, I had seen no issues that I was aware of whatsoever. Now, I worked with very experienced producers. I worked with very experienced first ADs. If we were dealing with stunts, we had an incredibly experienced stunt coordinator, always around. But what I've begun to realize since Mark's death, speaking to lots and lots of crew members, looking at the responses to not only the Mark Milsome Foundation survey, but to other surveys as well, is that this is the problem, is that it's not clear. People don't speak up, they don't complain, they don't make a fuss, and they feel in many ways that, one of the downsides of working in such a creative and exciting and diverse industry is that you have to dig deep and you have to work 15, 16, we've heard of 17 and 18 hour long days. And I think people feel like it's their duty to do it. And they're also very aware that the industry goes from job to job. And if they create a fuss, or if they ask problems or have concerns on one job, it's very possible that they might not be employed on the next job. And it's a freelance industry, and if they're not careful, if they fall out of line before they know it, they might not be getting employed as much as they were in the past. Yeah, it's really interesting. I wondered, I'm just like talking to the panel at large, whether maybe Rory, you've experienced any kind of that sense of, really grueling hours, because I think one of the things that comes out of this survey is that the actual working day is its own thing, but then, there's all the traveling time that you have to get to the set. And then there's the prep time, there, and then obviously the full working day, and then the time afterwards. So have you noticed a sense of the kind of elongating days in your work as an actor?
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, as actors in this country anyway, we are provided usually transport to and from work, but that's obviously not the case for everyone else. And particularly, say, hair and makeup, the hours that they have to be in, sometimes 3 or 4 hours before filming starts, are not included in the working day as it is seen. And so, yeah, sometimes, people might have a 4 or 5 hour turnaround. I was just working in America, and that is a country where actors do have to drive themselves to work. So it was the first time I'd sort of experienced what it is like for everyone else on set. And yeah, when you have a night shoot and you're driving home on the freeway at 6 o'clock in the morning, having been, up since 6 o'clock the previous morning, it immediately becomes clear, and it almost surprises you how few accidents there are at work. And you do realize how so much of health and safety in our workplace is predicated on luck rather than necessarily format.
It seems that a lot of this that basically these issues don't just happen, they're not just set based, basically. The dangers of health and safety when it's not done right often happen outside of the film set because, someone would be driving home after being overworked. I wondered if this is something that requires a kind of legal mandate from the government around working hours and being a bit stricter on perhaps like Jake, you'd be able to swing in here, given all your experience.
There is the working time directive, which is an EU law, which apparently you can opt out of. And it's quite complicated. It's based over 17 weeks of work. It's quite a thick document, and it's one that lawyers love because they can chew around it. And, even people like me, it's not clear. The one really clear thing about it is health surveillance, night work only being 8 hours, and then a mandatory 11-hour break from when you finish your work till we come the next day. So don't take travelling into it. So if you call wrap at 6, you're not meant to start work till 11 hours after that. But it's quite confusing. We've opted out of it. It's not something I do with my staff. We obviously, I think we were saying on our panel the other week, we're in Soho. We've got an issue with the camera crane. It's the only day we can do it. And crew are aware of that. We're going to go over 3-4 hours, and we have to. So there is scope, the exceptional circumstances, but because it's written quite woolly, you can play around with it a lot. Now, once we leave Brexit, that goes through. How that progresses, I don't know. But it is a common, and obviously junior doctors have the same problem, and there's other walks of life. But there is our working time directive, which we all should strive to achieve.
Great. So, Jake, staying with you for a moment, you've obviously worked at the forefront of film safety for years. Could you tell us what your view is of its current state?
Okay, well, to do that, I think I have to go back to 1997 when I first went onto a film set, and it was a construction site for a TV series, and it had just been shut down. And producers were standing. It was due to some poor scaffolding and work at height. And the HSC inspector had come past because there had been a complaint by a local neighbour, came onto the site and ordered what's called a prohibition notice. It's where you stop work straight away. And there's producers looking, going, well, they can't do this. And you're saying, well, they can. And they did. And you can imagine it took about 2 days to get the scaffolding back to. Then we had to contact the HSE for them to release the post. So that's 2 days of a production that stopped due to. So the consequences are there. So those days, because I regard the film and media TV as a construction, and it's a construction site till you put a camera in front and start filming wonderful actors like Rory and people like that. It's up to that point, it is a construction site. You're building a set, you're prepping it, you're putting electrics in. It's a construction site. So back in 97, I would say it was about a -3. And I have to be truthful, and I would say now, looking, having my walk round this morning, obviously we're in a different world with COVID, which we'll put to one side. But compliance is, and we would say we benchmark it against the construction industry, like your Skanskas, CISC, and people like that. And then 1997, we were 25 years behind. I think we're probably about 3 or 4 years behind in techniques, because it's quite hard to change. You get a new format scaffolding, because the production time is so quick. You've got to go to use tried and trusted methods, and to bring new methods in, sometimes it's quite difficult. So no one ever hits a 10. Even people like DuPont and ICI never hit a 10. But we're in a lot better place, and the education. More so, I think, is a lot.
Overall, what would you give the kind of UK TV and film industry in terms of its overall health and safety credentials out of 10? If I forced you to put a number on it,
6.8.
Okay, yeah, very accurate. Thanks. What have you found is the most common excuse for people who fail to uphold standards of health and safety on set?
I think, and I spoke the other day to someone about this, ignorance is not an excuse in law. And still to this day, I speak to people, we had some people using the most awful chemical to do a prosthetic. And we looked at it and we talked to them, and it was a good dialogue. We have good friends, and I was saying, do you know how harmful this stuff is? And you need to do a cost assessment, you do that. And I went, I didn't know. And I've been doing it for 20 years. And you have to say, ignorance is not an excuse. You can't stand up in court when someone's got respiratory asthma and suing you, or you'll be in that. You can't say, I didn't know, because it's not an excuse. And that's where the whole thing of training and awareness comes into it.
And obviously we found that some contracts opt out of the EU working directive, and also the 11-hour turnaround is often just, broken. So it seems that there maybe aren't enough consequences. Do you think there should be more health and safety training? I know that on our survey there was quite a willingness from people to be trained more rigorously.
I think, and also a learning curve for me very early on, and I have to, with the technicians and production staff, and from all walks, from Kirk to, and the people, the talent and skill level is just, in fact, some of the stuff that's turned out is just absolutely fantastic. So I can't criticise people for this actual basic skill knowledge, but obviously it's their health and safety knowledge. And that's got to be proportionate. And that's from a bloke who, or one of the guys or the girls who drive a forklift and their training they need, up to a producer who is the ultimate duty holder. And you have to use that word, duty holder, and holds the responsibility, because that's the person who's going to, if he hasn't got systems and people knowing what their responsibility is. So someone from a producer, and it's proportionate training. But the only answer to moving forward is training, and creating a safety culture. And as part of that training, and there's so many courses out there, and also induction. I still find so many places do not do a brief induction. I mean, I know in America, they're very good for it. Each morning, the first to get up, and then Rory back me up on this, and they will give a safety briefing. And there's the exit. This is what we're doing. The English, I think it may be a bit reserved, but we are getting better, and we assist the first ADs in doing that, who's like the sergeant major of the floor. But you go into a location, and there's still not an induction. Where is the toilets? Where is it? If the alarm goes off, where do I go? These are the restrictions. And it goes
on a typical day of, on a set, say about 60 crew, how many people usually are competently trained and certified in health and safety?
0.5%.
Great. Thanks.
Sorry,
that's useful
about
to
that,
know.
They're trained in their skills. Their skill knowledge is excellent, and they're trained that. So the electricians are all qualified electricians.
Yeah.
But their safety training, saying working at height, different uses of working at height, that type of thing. That's what the fundamental safety training.
Yeah. Just wanting to kind of open it out again to people. Do we think that it might be useful to have like a kind of health and safety passport? So much more rigorous kind of tick boxing that people all have to sign up to? Would production companies actually sign up for it? Maybe Sue, you can weigh in here.
Screen Skills do the production safety passport, which is good thing. But that's more crew. I think actual production companies should sign up for it. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about is, the 11-hour turnaround. We all know about the 11-hour turnaround, and we should be sticking to it. That's the thing. If makeup have to come in earlier, they should be leaving earlier. You can stagger people. Maybe not all production companies do. We're not certainly not made to sign up to anything. We are more now with. We did something with Netflix recently, and it was compulsory that we did training on bullying, harassment, health and safety things. We're doing something else. Sky are very hot on it as well. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's coming in, but it's not yet compulsory that production companies are. And I think, bear in mind, the producers are the ones, as you say, that are ultimately responsible. I'm not entirely sure that all producers know all the safety elements they should be looking at either.
Yeah, so it's kind of passing the parcel around and no one's really sure who's got it, maybe.
I think as a foundation, we've been asking whether it would be physically possible, and we're actually working on a project at the moment for everyone who steps foot on a film set to have passed or to have a basic certification in health and safety. And I've spoken to Jake a little bit about this. I've spoken to some first aid people. What we would like to propose, because I think one of the issues, through no one's fault, is that in order to train proficiently in health and safety, you need to give up 1, 2, 3 days. You need to either be sponsored or pay yourself, fees of hundreds of pounds. And I think one of the reasons why Jake says maybe 0.5% of people on set are aware of health and safety and aware of how to behave is because nobody really has the time or the money to invest in it, and they're certainly not really rewarded for it on set. We're looking at an online proposal at the moment, which could be taken by anyone in their own time at home. We're looking at a cost of something around £20, so it's very achievable. And our hope would be that no one would walk on set in the future without having that very, very basic knowledge, which everyone can then share. I think at the moment, if anyone talks about health and safety, people look to each other and one person will say, well, I think that's okay. And another person will say, oh, no, you can't do that. And there's no basic education. And in the survey I talked about early on, we asked about, would people be prepared to volunteer and to take a course of that kind? And 72% of the respondents said they would volunteer. Another 22% said that if it was a recognised certificate in the industry, they would also come forward and they'd like to take the exam. So that's 94% of people. So there's a hunger, there's an appetite for knowledge, and people are happy to do it as long as they can do it at home. If it costs £20, and then maybe people like Sue in the future, maybe if that became standard, before any young person, an 18-year-old just getting some work experience, you say, look, we can give you some work experience. You just need to make sure you have the Mark Milsome Health and Safety Certificate beforehand. They can do it. And it just means that everyone is on a level par, at the very least, when discussions take place on set.
I can't see why you wouldn't. I'm surprised by the fact there's 6% that wouldn't do it, actually. Yeah. I mean, quite a while ago, I remember when I went and did something at the BBC, it was Comic Relief or something, they had the online one that you had to fill out, I think, before you could even work at the BBC, didn't they? They had a... but I think it's a great idea.
Great. Rory, if we could turn to you. You have a very personal connection to health and safety on set after the death of your father. Could you possibly tell us what happened and how he was failed by the system?
Yes, it was 32 years ago now. It was 1988, and he was filming a film called The Return of the Musketeers, which was a follow-up to 2 films in the 70s, which had been hugely successful, the 3 and 4 Musketeers, both directed by Richard Lester, who was directing The Return of the Musketeers as well. And the actors had come in to be working in the afternoon, whilst during the morning there was going to be a sort of a long shot of the 4 Musketeers and my dad riding across this bridge in Toledo. And the actors sort of were all chatting and getting into their costumes when they were told, actually, we're going to get you to do an earlier shot. And what had transpired is that the stuntmen had seen the shot as it was set up and what they were required to do. And the bridge in Toledo was a cobbled bridge, and they'd said, the cobbles would be too dangerous for a horse's hooves. We're not going to do it. And so they'd been able to say no. The director was so sort of annoyed at the prospect of losing half a day's filming and losing that shot in particular, that he said, well, fine, let's just get the actors to do it instead if the stuntmen are going to make a fuss. And quite a lot of the other actors were quite experienced horsemen. My dad was not at all, but not wanting to make a fuss and being a biddable kind of guy, got on the horse and as they rounded the corner at the end of the bridge, his horse's hoof slipped, as the stuntman had predicted, and he'd fallen off the horse and broken his pelvis. He was then taken to a sort of a local clinic rather than a hospital with any kind of emergency treatment. And over the next 24 hours, he slowly bled to death. The reason I got involved with Andra and Kirk and Mark is the realization that 32 years later, people were still saying yes when what they meant was no. For me, obviously the pain of having to repeat one story continually and on set as often as I do is no pleasure to me, but I feel it's a burden that I wear quite willingly to educate people, and particularly younger actors coming in, about the ability to say no. And I think any kind of health and safety initiative that we have has to lead with that, is that you can say no. And even when you're feeling maybe, that still means no. It's been interesting to see over the last couple of years the seismic shift when it comes to behavior around sex and around intimacy on sets. And within a couple of years, to be standardized as quickly as it has been and mandatory, that there are intimacy coordinators for when people either have to be have scenes of a sexual nature or between adults and young kids or whatever it is. That has come on within 2 years. 32 years after my dad dies, or 29 years later, Mark is killed in an accident of a similar nature, and also from a similar man, a man hugely loved, hugely popular, and one of those people that you would be the first to stick your hand up for and say, if Mark doesn't feel comfortable or if Roy doesn't feel comfortable, we shouldn't do this. And neither of those times did it happen. It's interesting that both also happened abroad, and that sense that no matter the fact that these are usually American or British-led productions, they are made in another country, either for locations and for the look of the show, but also quite often from cost. I made a show set in Nottinghamshire that we filmed in South Africa and Namibia just because it was cheaper. And despite all the legislation that we have in our own country, that seems to a certain extent evaporate when we're filming abroad. And no matter the fact, as an actor, I don't really know the laws around what is permissible in my own country. I certainly don't know it if I go to South Africa or to Lithuania or to wherever it is. And these offshoot companies are made within those foreign companies for this particular film or this particular project, and they get governed by the laws of that country. Now, it is one of the greatest things about our job is that we are able to travel as much as we do, work with different communities, work and discover new working practices from going abroad. But in terms of how you feel within those countries, and the times where I've felt most in danger, and admittedly can come from the fact that you feel less secure generally, but the times where I've either ended up in hospital or been asked to do things that I haven't, have all occurred in other countries, and I think that's also part of what Kirk and Andra are trying to do with the Mark Milsome Foundation, is to make sure that these principles and these regulations don't just cover us when we're working, within the M25 or in Manchester, wherever it is. That these are principles that are rolled out globally, because our industry is a global one and an international one. And for all the positives of that, there are also concerns.
Yeah. Could you talk about this power imbalance that you touched on? Because I think it'd be really interesting to kind of unpick why it is that some people, actors or crew, don't feel up to, saying, actually, I feel quite uncomfortable about doing this in this way.
Yeah, I mean, it's freelance life, and freelance is fragile. The whole business is predicated on people coming together. And it relies on a togetherness, and that increases, in fact, when you're away from home and abroad. But there's still, no matter what you're doing, the sense that we will not be able to do it unless we all work together. Now, unfortunately, that seems to have developed in a way that if you put your hand up and say, I don't feel comfortable, in the back of your mind, you're not joining in that togetherness. Whereas actually what we sort of need societally to change, I mean the society of film sets, is that if someone puts their hand up and says, I don't feel comfortable, the togetherness is people coming around them and saying, we've got your back. We're here for you as well. And I feel like, as it is currently, no one wants to make a fuss, as Kirk said, because you're worried that you won't be asked again. Even those people, at the top of the cast list, or even like DOPs who've worked for 30, 40 years, occasionally find themselves in positions where saying, and I've heard them say, phew, we got away with that. Whereas, as I was talking about with the intimacy issues, there is now a sort of a standardized yes means yes, no means no, and maybe means no. That sort of has to come into health and safety and the way that we work as well. And the knowledge, and I wish this could in some way become more emblematic of the whole thing, is that there is always another shot. That saying no to a director or artist or somebody is not actually a limiter on their artistic capabilities or vision. It can often be an enabler of further and sometimes more rewarding ones. And yes, we are all there because we believe in what we do, and we believe it's important, and we believe that if we can make it the best it can be, it can impact people's lives and it can have a lasting effect. But equally, the lasting effect of my dad dying is hugely outweighs the lasting impact of even the best film there's ever been.
Yeah. After his death, there was a sense that things might change. There was this kind of willingness to review health and safety. Have you seen any evidence that has kind of happened over the decades since?
I was 10 when he died, so my knowledge of what the film industry was then is obviously very limited. I do know the very first job I had, which was filming out in Morocco, day 3, and this, as a 22 or 3-year-old, somebody says, actually, it'd be great if you could get on this horse and ride up this hill. Now, there's a hugely positive and emboldening force that grief has for me to be able to say in my first job, I'm not doing that. And if you want to push me as to why I'm not doing that, I've got a terrific get out of jail card, and I have not been scared to use that for the rest of my career, and indeed to give that card to other actors I'm working with. And I know a lot of actors from older than me do sort of use my dad's death as a reason for something not to happen on set. But at the same time, as much as this story might be well known to a lot of older people, there is still a new generation coming through who don't know it. And obviously to have to keep repeating it, and to now in some ways have to join forces with the Mark Milsome Foundation to say it didn't stop then. We haven't made enough gains in our understanding to continue to have to do that. Is obviously it's exhausting and saddening to realize that so little has changed. But I don't want to be on a set where somebody not just dies, somebody has a serious accident, and I will feel the guilt because I didn't say my story. Yeah.
Maybe we could open it out a bit to the panel. So just to talk about, potentially, Jake, you could talk about the kind of current method of calling out worry around safety, who crew and cast can talk to. What other thoughts that you have on what Rory said?
Very interesting, Rory, and my heart goes out to you. Why are people having to say no? Why happen to people saying, because the people asking them to do this stuff are not trained and don't have the awareness. So they're asking somebody to, and they actually might think that's a good idea and it's not dangerous. So that I talk about duty holders a lot and responsibilities, and as you go up the chain, the people asking these people to do things should have the most awareness, because the poor person at the end of that who's going, shall I not say it, is the one that's going to potentially get injured or hurt. But the person telling them to do that is the person who's going to end up in the dock and potentially go to prison for asking them to there's quite a good American, it's called willingly and knowingly to do that. And it's when I hear that, which Kirk said earlier, that if you say, stick your hand up, that I might not get another job. Well, we live in Middle Ages, and if we're in that situation, there's a fundamental problem that people are worried about. And people say the freelancing, and I get the freelance. As soon as they come through a gate of a location or a studio, they're employed by someone, and that employer has a duty of care, legal duty of care, to make sure that person goes home at the end of the day. Steve Johnson, who was one of my very first lecturers, the 3 points of safety and why you should do it, and it's the financial problem, or it's the legal problem, or it's the business reputation problem, and you always miss one thing out. It's a moral obligation.
Could I ask whether we, thanks, could I just quickly ask before we move on to talk to Sue, whether we should perhaps have an anonymous method of reporting? Maybe Kirk or Sue, you'd like to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think there should be. As I said, certainly now Netflix and Sky that we're both working with, there is an anonymous number that the crew have. I mean, I would like to think that if somebody came to me and said they felt unsafe about something, that we wouldn't do it. I mean, it's interesting, Rory, you were talking about the horse, saying get on a horse. That should never happen, because there should already have been a conversation and there should have been a risk assessment. And if they were talking about putting you on a horse, somebody along the line would have worked out what the risk of that was and what they would have to do to make that safer. Do you ride? Do you need to have riding lessons? Can a stunt person do it? So to do it on the day, it's just bad planning. That's the problem. So if there's bad planning, I think an important thing is getting around the bad planning. And if there is an anonymous number somewhere along the line, you've got to have somebody at the other end of the phone at that point in time to stop you having to do it if you don't feel safe enough to say no. So I don't quite know whether the anonymous number will work as well as we want it to. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I do think also that the nature of the anonymity compounds the issue, which is it shouldn't have to be anonymous. You should be able and emboldened enough by being employed, by being asked to be part of this community that is making this thing, to be able to say, actually, no, this doesn't feel good to me. Now, obviously, people's versions of what feels safe for them can range a bit, but if somebody is not feeling comfortable, then it is more likely that they will have an accident. It's also that sense of that we'll just get by, and and I guess that thing of planning. There is legislation. There are recce's done. There is everything that can be done. Maybe not everything, but there is a lot that can be done before a day's shooting takes place, whereby people's health and safety have been put at the forefront of people's minds. On the day, things happen. Things change. Things don't turn up. Things aren't there. And a director has an idea, an actor has an idea in which they can change this scene, or which actually a shot will be more interesting. What those things happen on the day are the things that cause the accidents. And there's no amount of planning for them that people can do with because they didn't know that they were going to happen. It's how we respond in those moments to those already accidents that can lead to greater accidents. And in those already accidents, if someone has made a mistake, or if someone has gone against what was in the original planning, then I think everyone has the right to say, no, this isn't what I signed up for. Obviously, if the idea is great, it's safe, it looks like it's going to be a far more interesting shot or a more interesting scene to do it, everyone's going to be on board for that. But if it requires something that makes an actor or a crew member feel unsafe, they can say, this isn't what we were meant to do today.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So in your experience, obviously producing some amazing TV shows, are health and safety concerns kind of woven into projects from the start?
Yeah, I mean, we get them very early. So, for instance, if you look at something like Dracula, we did some of it in Slovakia. So our health and safety person would go on the first recce's with us, and we'd meet the Slovakian health and safety, and you do it there. I mean, interestingly, I think at the moment what's happening, we're starting shooting something next week, and the COVID has taken up so much people's time and thing that we've actually done a different. We've said to right, done the COVID. We know what we're doing on the COVID. Now let's look at the general health and safety and make sure that everyone's on top of that as well. Do you know what I mean? So then we'll do kind of HOD health and safety course. They all come in and do that. Because I think you bust a gut to make television or film. We all love making television or film. We're also heard to say to ourselves, it is just television. Do you know what I mean? Nothing is worth the risk for a shot for television. That's the thing.
Do you think there's much confusion around is there confusion around health and safety accountability and responsibility? Who actually, where the buck stops, basically?
I think there is. I mean, I think producers, obviously, the top buck stops there. Then I think the problem is, you can tell everybody about working at height. You can tell every rigger about, harnessing on and stuff like that. There is also a responsibility that people have to look after their own safety. You can supply all the all the jackets. They've got to go and put them on. So I think there are heads of departments, I think, have to look after their departments better as well. We were talking about, and I know we're talking about tiredness and hotel. I think, I would like to think if anyone comes to me and says that, can I have a hotel, I'm tired, that we would give them a hotel. If you're doing a night shoot and then you've got a rest day and then you book everybody a hotel, they've then got to go and stay in the hotel. You can't really book the hotel, then they all decide to go home anyway. You know what I mean? So it's a permanent balance thing.
Do you think that hours should be kind of capped, reduced?
To be honest with you, I don't think necessarily the hours are too long. I think if you are going to cap the hours, you're going to have to reduce the money. I mean, obviously people would like to have shorter hours. You've got to ask the question, are they happy to do that for less money? I think as long as you have the turnarounds properly and it's done sensibly, but you've also got to there's a rule and there's laws, and then you've got to work out what's going on personally. Yes, I'm within those hours for people to work that time, but are they too far from home? Have they suddenly gone into nights and therefore they haven't had a full night's sleep the night before? If you suddenly flip into nights, people can't suddenly have a great big long lie-in because they know they're going to be working tonight. So you have to take that into consideration and work out how tired someone's going to be at the end of that night. I think you have to look at whether if you've got a 10-hour shooting day or you have a continuous day, is continuous day the best day and make it a shorter day? Or are you then lacking reassessment time? We're talking about if something changes on set, you need to have time to reassess that and work out if it's still safe, if you're changing a plan. And sometimes if you don't have a lunch break, you can't always do that. So,
and how do you sort of balance demands to reduce and manage budgets and pressure to achieve a lot on a shoot, on one day, say, complications with COVID. So all that's going on, but then also still have the time to give health and safety the kind of the time and finances it kind of needs.
I would like to say that we just do, because health and safety is hugely important to us as a company. Yeah. I mean, if you've got something in a script that's going to take a whole load of cars and stunts and things, and you haven't got the money, then cut the shot. Don't try and do a cheaper version of that shot. It's not worth that. So I think you do it at a much earlier stage. Can we afford to do this properly? I mean, the COVID thing is interesting. It's just costing more money. But the broadcasters are supporting that. I think maybe there needs to be a bigger conversation about health and safety and putting that in the budgets properly. I think we do. I'm not sure everyone does. I'm not saying we're perfect, but it is expensive. It's really expensive.
Opening it up to the panel, if anyone maybe, Jake, would you like to,
I mean, Sue, and what costs, so you think health and safety cost you?
Well, on COVID, I think we know what's costing at the moment.
In a non-COVID world, what's your big costs?
Well, at the moment with us, because we have a lot of health, we have a lot of someone like you, who's spending a lot of time going around every single location, every single studio, looking at everything. We look at health risk assessments.
But if people were trained, you wouldn't need people like me.
Oh God, Jay, that'd be awful. I think we'd all need people like you. I think. No,
as a safety professional, one of your things is you're made to make yourself redundant. Enable the people you're working for to engage and to do what you do. And obviously, you're not meant to know every single law, but, it's to enable the duty holders. And that's why the Health and Safety at Work Act was created in 1974, because before that, it was all very prescriptive. And after the big, the Penny Fan and the big Lincolnshire fire, Lord Rubin turned and said, well, you guys, you do this stuff. You take charge of the risk. But you buy the risk, and with the help, support, training. But it's quite an interesting one, because I'm very conscious when you talk to producers, every sort of thing I would ask for, or say you need to do this and you need to, because I want to see what goes on the screen. Costs. So I'm very, very conscious of their costs. Yeah. And that's where your risk assessment comes in. That's why a good risk assessment.
Rory,
a very unusual position as well, not just with COVID, but, when you think about not so long ago, the appetite that people had for programming in this country was pretty much limited to what was on the cinema that weekend. And those films would come and go within a couple of weeks, and maybe 3 or 4 TV channels. We are now working in a completely different universe with the demand for programming. And I can imagine, it isn't my responsibility and I'm not in that position, but I can imagine if I was commissioning programming, I would want to do whatever I could to say, look, you can make this program, but it needs to be within this budget. I mean, that's just life. That's how business works. And I think in addition to that, we're finding ourselves in an industry which is under a lot of pressure to impress more and more and more with stunts and special effects. Again, if you look back to some of the very early Bond films or Superman films, the effects are just a little creaky when you look at those films, which were great. Now people, look at Bond movies, Bourne Ultimatum, Fast and Furious, and their expectations, Mission Impossible, are way beyond what they used to be. So there's almost less money, there's more pressure, and there's more material is needed to satisfy people's appetite.
We're going to wrap now. Rory, do you have any final thoughts to finish us off?
I guess just, as Sue was saying herself, that no shot is that important. There's always not only just another shot, there's always another scene, and there's always another show. And in the back of our minds that we give so much of our time, energy, artistry, commitment to these projects, there must be also something that is just as vocal as our passion within our brains as well, that says it's not that important. And for something like knowing that I've dragged myself to set with norovirus once because I was so worried that they wouldn't be able to do the shot that they were hoping to do had I not turned up. I mean, I turned up to set and they immediately sent me home. And as I was going home, I remembered after my dad's death, they completed the film with a body double for my dad. It's not that important that we're still there. There are ways around things. If there's anything to create afresh within the society of filmmaking, it's that, and it's not sort of a pass for relaxation and insouciance, but more a pass to suggest that give everything that you can up to the point that you are unable to.
Thank you so much to everybody for participating. It's really brilliant of you to give up your time. And we obviously huge thanks to the Mark Milsome Foundation and to Bectu as well for sharing their survey on long hours in the industry. I think we've been talking about so many interesting things, but things that stand out are, the kind of this no culture, which really needs to be broken down. maybe a kind of an introduction of much more widespread training for everyone who turns up on a set, so that there's a basic level of kind of lingua franca that people are speaking, so that to avoid this accidents from happening again. And obviously we'd like to see this debate actually produce some results. So hopefully a kind of health and safety passport, and ways maybe to explore either anonymously reporting or changing the culture around reporting problems on set, and a campaign perhaps to make it okay to say no. And obviously, as Rory said, that maybe means no. So I'd just like to thank you again for giving up all your time and your thoughts. And I hope that people who are watching this have also walked away with something, with lots to think about, and hopefully put into action in their own working lives. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks.